They say when you corner a predator, it becomes most dangerous. What the Galactic Council didn't understand was that humans had been cornered for 300 years, and they were about to discover why every extinct civilization in the galaxy had one thing in common: they had all tried to cage humanity. Princess Zaraeth thought she was making the ultimate sacrifice for peace. A political marriage to end the bloodiest war in galactic history seems simple enough. But, as she stood before her human husband on their wedding night, watching him methodically clean weapons she'd never seen before, she began to wonder if she had just signed her empire's death warrant. The humans had been suspiciously quiet about their terms for the marriage treaty. Now she was about to learn why. In the depths of space, ancient protocols were awakening. Dormant ships stirred to life. And, somewhere in the void between stars, something that had been waiting for centuries began to move. The Veltar Empire thought they were gaining a pet. They were about to discover they had invited the apex predator into their home. The crystalline spires of the Veltar capital world gleamed like frozen starlight against the purple sky, their surfaces reflecting the 3 moons that hung like watchful eyes above the ceremony. Princess Zaraeth adjusted her ceremonial robes for the 100th time, the bioluminescent threads shifting from deep blue to anxious silver with her emotions. In 3 hours, she would marry a creature her people considered barely above wild animals. The humans called themselves Homo sapiens, though the Galactic Council's xenobiology reports classified them as an aggressive primate species from a death world called Earth. They had appeared in galactic space exactly 312 years ago, arriving in crude ships that somehow managed to traverse distances that should have taken their primitive technology millennia. The first contact had been disastrous. "Your Highness, the preparations are complete." High Counselor Vexhan entered her chambers without ceremony, his 4 arms carrying various ceremonial implements. His scaled hide showed the deep green of satisfaction, though Zaraeth could detect underlying currents of orange anxiety. "The human delegation has arrived." Zaraeth turned from the window where she had been watching the orbital defense platforms, their massive forms casting shadows across the planet's surface. Those platforms had been built after the First Human War, when a single human ship had somehow penetrated their defenses and delivered what they called a diplomatic message directly to the palace steps. The message had been simple: talk or face consequences. How many ships did they bring, she asked, though she already knew the answer from the morning briefings. 1. Vexhan's hide rippled with confusion. "A small transport vessel. Our sensors can barely detect any weapons systems." That was exactly what worried her. The humans never did anything without purpose, and their idea of diplomacy often involved demonstrations of force that left entire fleets questioning everything they thought they knew about warfare. The Treaty of Kethera had ended the 300-year conflict, but only after the humans had done something to the hegemony's 4th fleet that the survivors still refused to discuss. "And, intended?" The word tasted bitter on her forked tongue. "He arrived this morning. Admiral Marcus Kane." Vexhan consulted his neural interface, the biomechanical implant glowing softly behind his left eye. Age 35 in human terms. Military record heavily classified, but what we can access shows involvement in 17 major campaigns. He's currently standing in the ceremonial gardens, apparently studying our defense grid architecture. Of course he was. Zaraeth had spent weeks reviewing every scrap of intelligence the Empire possessed on human military doctrine, and one thing remained consistent: they never stopped gathering information. Even at their own wedding celebrations, humans maintained what their files called situational awareness. She made her way through the palace corridors, her security detail maintaining respectful distance. The walls displayed holographic murals of Veltar history, from their first emergence as a species to their current status as the dominant power in the outer spiral. Thousands of years of evolution, culture, and conquest reduced to pretty pictures for diplomatic occasions. The ceremonial gardens occupied 3 levels of the palace, with exotic flora from across the empire creating a symphony of colors and scents designed to impress visiting dignitaries. Water features channeled mineral-rich streams from the planet's core, their phosphorescent properties creating an otherworldly ambience that had moved even the cynical Rodhack's ambassadors to something approaching poetry. She found him exactly where Vexhan had indicated, standing motionless near the central fountain with his hands clasped behind his back. Admiral Marcus Kane looked nothing like the savage her people expected. Average height by human standards, which made him slightly shorter than most Veltar nobility. Dark hair cropped short in military fashion. Plain brown eyes that seemed to catalog every detail of his surroundings without apparent effort. What struck her immediately was his stillness. Veltar moved constantly, their emotions displaying through skin color changes and unconscious gestures. Humans, she had read, were similar in their expressiveness. But this one remained perfectly motionless, as if carved from stone. Admiral Kane. She approached using the formal diplomatic greeting, her translator implant automatically adjusting for human linguistic patterns. He turned, and she experienced her first surprise. His eyes weren't examining her as a curiosity or potential threat. Instead, he studied her face with what appeared to be genuine interest, as if she were a puzzle he found intellectually engaging. "Your Highness." His bow was precise, neither mocking nor overly deferential. "I appreciate the Empire's hospitality. You were observing our defenses." "I was admiring your architecture. The integration of defensive systems with aesthetic design shows remarkable engineering sophistication." He gestured toward the orbital platforms visible through the garden's transparent dome. "Those platforms achieve overlapping coverage while maintaining the visual harmony of your cityscape." "Impressive." She waited for the threat that usually followed human compliments. When none came, she found herself momentarily off balance. "You're not what I expected." "What did you expect?" "Someone more." She searched for appropriate words. "Aggressive. Demanding. Human." Something that might have been amusement flickered across his features. "I am human, Your Highness. That's precisely why I'm here." Before she could ask what he meant, her personal aide materialized from the garden's shadows. Cathal had served her family for 20 years, and his ability to appear and disappear without sound remained one of his most useful talents. "Your Highness, His Imperial Majesty requests your presence in the council chambers." Immediately. Zariath felt her skin shift toward alarmed purple. Emergency council sessions on her wedding day could only mean one thing: something had gone catastrophically wrong. The council chambers occupied the palace's highest tower, their windows providing panoramic views of the capital and beyond. Emperor Thaxion sat upon the crystalline throne, his massive form dwarfing even the oversized furniture designed for Veltar physiology. Around him, the Empire's highest military commanders and civilian leaders maintained the rigid formations that protocol demanded. "Daughter." The Emperor's voice resonated through bioacoustic amplifiers built into the throne itself. "We have received troubling intelligence." Fleet Admiral Zektar stepped forward, his scarred hide showing the deep red of barely controlled fury. 3 hours ago, our deep space monitoring stations detected massive energy signatures in the void reaches. Previously uncharted regions of space are suddenly showing activity. "What kind of activity?" Zariath asked, though she suspected she already knew. "Ships, Your Highness. Hundreds of them. Possibly thousands." The Admiral's hide shifted toward anxious orange. "Unknown configuration, but energy readings suggest technology levels far beyond anything in our databases." Emperor Thaxion leaned forward, his natural bioluminescence casting eerie shadows across the chamber. "More concerning is their trajectory. These vessels are moving toward the galactic core, following routes that would bring them through our territory." "Have we attempted communication?" Zariath asked. No response to any standard diplomatic frequencies. However, Admiral Zektar paused, his emotional display cycling through confusion and fear. "The lead elements of this fleet are broadcasting a single repeating message on an ancient emergency frequency. A frequency that, according to our historical databases, has been silent for over 50,000 years." The chamber fell silent except for the subtle hum of the throne's power systems. 50,000 years ago marked the end of the predecessor civilization, the mysterious race that had left scattered ruins across the galaxy before vanishing without explanation. Every spacefaring species had theories about their disappearance, but no evidence had ever been found. "What does the message say?" she asked. "It's in an unknown language, but our translation matrices have identified certain recurring elements. The closest approximation would be..."
Admiral Zektar consulted his neural interface.
Protocol 7 acknowledged.
Responding to activation signal. Estimate arrival in 72 hours. Ice formed in Zoroetha's veins as the implications became clear. Activation signal?
That's what concerns us most, Your Highness.
The transmission began exactly 18 hours ago.
Precisely when the human delegation entered our system.
The pieces fell into place with horrifying clarity. The humans' insistence on minimal escort.
Their casual attitude toward what should have been tense negotiations.
Admiral Kane's calm assessment of their defenses, as if he already knew exactly how effective they would be. Recall the fleet, Emperor Thaxion commanded.
All vessels, all stations.
Full military alert. Your Imperial Majesty, High Counselor Vexhan spoke carefully. What of the wedding? The treaty?
The Emperor's Hyde cycled through colors Zarayath had never seen before, emotional states so complex they defied her understanding. The wedding will proceed as planned. We need to understand what the humans have done, and our best opportunity lies in maintaining their cooperation.
Father, Zarayath said quietly, I don't think cooperation is what they're offering.
Through the chamber's massive windows, she could see the human transport ship hanging motionless in orbit. Such a small vessel, barely larger than a Veltar courier craft. Yet as she watched, more ships began to appear in the distance. Not the mysterious fleet from the void reaches, but human vessels dropping out of hyperspace with the precision of a military formation.
Admiral, the Emperor said, his voice carrying the weight of absolute authority, how many human ships are now in our system? Admiral Zektar's hands moved frantically over his control interface. 12, no, 20.
Your Majesty, they're appearing faster than our sensors can track them.
All armed? Unknown. Their stealth technology makes detailed scans impossible.
Zarayath watched the ships take positions around the orbital defense platforms. Not threatening positions, but places where they could observe everything that happened on the planet's surface.
Like guests at a wedding who wanted good seats for the ceremony.
Your Highness, Cathal appeared at her side again. Admiral Kane has requested permission to join you in the council chambers. He says he has information that might be helpful. The chamber erupted in angry discussion, military commanders demanding answers while civilian leaders calculated political consequences. Through it all, Emperor Thaxion remained motionless on his throne, his bioluminescence dimmed to almost nothing. Send him up, the Emperor said finally.
Admiral Kane entered the council chambers with the same measured calm he had displayed in the gardens.
His plain military uniform stood out starkly against the elaborate ceremonial dress of the Veltar leadership, but he seemed completely comfortable being the center of attention.
Your Imperial Majesty. Distinguished counselors.
His greeting included the entire chamber without singling out any individual.
I understand you have questions about recent developments.
Admiral, Fleet Admiral Zektar stepped forward aggressively. Your species has somehow activated technology that predates known civilization.
We demand an explanation.
Kane looked around the chamber, his expression thoughtful.
Fleet Admiral, with respect, demands aren't really appropriate at this point.
What you're seeing represents the culmination of 300 years of preparation.
Preparation for what?
Emperor Thaxion's voice carried harmonics that indicated barely controlled fury.
For this moment.
For this choice. Kane moved to the chamber's central display, his hands manipulating the holographic controls with surprising familiarity. The display shifted to show the approaching fleet from the void reaches, hundreds of ships moving with purpose through previously empty space. Those vessels represent something that humanity discovered shortly after our arrival in galactic space.
We found ruins, you see. Predecessor ruins. And, unlike every other species in the galaxy, we actually bothered to study them properly.
The display zoomed in on the lead ships, revealing architecture that seemed to bend space around itself in ways that defied conventional physics.
The predecessors didn't disappear, Your Imperial Majesty. They evolved. Transcended physical existence to explore realms beyond normal spacetime. But, they left safeguards behind. Guardians. Guardians against what? Zaraeth asked. Kane's expression grew serious.
against species that might follow the same path they did, but without the wisdom to use such power responsibly.
The predecessors learned from observation that technological advancement without corresponding ethical development leads to universal destruction.
Admiral Zektar's hide flashed angry red.
You're claiming these ships are some kind of galactic police force?
No, Admiral.
I'm telling you they're a galactic extinction protocol.
And every major empire in known space just failed their evaluation.
The chamber exploded into chaos, voices raised in denial and outrage.
Kane waited patiently for the noise to subside before continuing. 3 centuries ago, when humanity first encountered galactic civilization, we discovered something interesting. Every species we met had reached roughly the same technological plateau. Faster than light travel, energy weapons, defensive shields, basic artificial intelligence. But none had advanced beyond that point. That's the natural progression of technological development, High Counselor Vexhan protested.
No, it's not.
Kane manipulated the display again, showing historical data that made Zarath's blood run cold. Every species reaches that plateau and, then, stops advancing.
Sometimes for thousands of years.
We found the reason in those predecessor ruins. The display showed what appeared to be a vast monitoring network, sensors and automated systems scattered across the galaxy like invisible spider webs. The Guardians have been watching, evaluating, testing every spacefaring civilization for 50,000 years.
Those that show promise for peaceful development are allowed to continue.
Those that demonstrate excessive aggression, territorial expansion, or technological irresponsibility. The display shifted to show barren star systems, worlds stripped of all life.
Are eliminated. And, you activated this system?
Emperor Thaxion's voice dropped to a whisper. We activated the evaluation protocol. For the first time in galactic history, a species made contact with the Guardian network and convinced them to conduct a comprehensive assessment of current civilizations. Kane's expression remained calm, but Zarath detected something that might have been sadness in his eyes.
The preliminary results were not encouraging.
What does that mean for the treaty? She heard herself ask.
For the marriage?
Kane turned to face her directly, and, for the first time since entering the chamber, his professional mask slipped slightly. Princess Zarath, the marriage treaty was humanity's attempt to find an alternative to the standard evaluation process. We hoped that by forming permanent bonds with other species, we might be able to influence the Guardian decision.
And, if that doesn't work?
Then, in approximately 71 hours, every aggressive spacefaring civilization in the galaxy will face judgment from beings who consider the extinction of entire species a routine administrative procedure. The silence that followed was broken only by the soft humming of the throne's power systems and the distant sound of wedding preparations continuing far below in the palace. Somewhere in the gardens, musicians were practicing ceremonial songs that might be the last music the Veltar Empire ever heard.
Admiral, Zarath said quietly, exactly what are you asking of us?
Nothing you weren't already prepared to give, Your Highness.
A wedding. A political alliance.
And, perhaps, if we're very fortunate, a chance to prove that some civilizations deserve to survive. Through the chamber windows, the human fleet continued to grow, their ships taking positions around every major orbital installation. Not as conquerors, Zarath realized, but as witnesses. They were here to observe what happened next, to report back to forces that made galactic empires look like squabbling children. The wedding would proceed as planned.
But, now she understood that the ceremony wasn't just about political alliance between two species.
It was about whether either of their civilizations would exist to see the next sunrise. The ceremonial hall stretched before them like a crystalline cathedral, its bioluminescent columns pulsing with the heartbeat of the planet itself. Thousands of Veltar nobility filled the tiered seating, their emotional displays creating a rainbow of nervous anticipation across the vast space. At the center, beneath the dome that showed the star-filled void above, Princess Zarath stood beside Admiral Marcus Kane as High Priest Yexthal began the ancient ritual that would bind their species in marriage.
Zarath could feel the weight of history pressing down upon her shoulders like a physical force.
Every diplomatic marriage in Veltar history had been about political advantage, territorial disputes, or trade agreements. None had ever carried the potential for galactic extinction as part of the prenuptial negotiations. By the ancient laws of our ancestors, High Priest Yexthal intoned, his voice amplified through the hall's acoustic crystals, we gather to witness the joining of worlds, the binding of bloodlines, the creation of bonds that will endure beyond the stars themselves. Kane stood motionless beside her, his human stillness contrasting sharply with the subtle movements of Veltar physiology. She had expected him to show some sign of tension, some indication that he understood the magnitude of what was happening. Instead, he seemed almost meditative, as if the ceremony was merely one item on a very long checklist. Through the dome above, she could see the human fleet maintaining their positions around the orbital defense platforms. What had started as 12 ships had grown to nearly 100, each one appearing without warning from hyperspace. Her father's military advisors had stopped trying to count them after the 50th vessel materialized directly above the palace. Princess Zaraeth of the Veltar Empire, the High Priest continued, do you enter this union freely, understanding that your choice affects not only yourself but all those who follow your bloodline? I do, she replied, the traditional words carrying new weight in current circumstances. Admiral Marcus Kane of the Human Federation, do you enter this union freely, understanding that your choice affects not only yourself but all those who follow your bloodline? I do, Kane replied, his voice carrying clearly through the hall without amplification. As the High Priest began the next ritual phase, Zaraeth found herself studying her husband-to-be's profile. The intelligence reports had described humans as emotionally volatile, quick to anger, prone to irrational decisions based on primitive instincts. But Kane displayed none of these characteristics. Instead, he radiated a kind of controlled intensity that reminded her of the orbital defense platforms themselves, massive potential energy held in perfect balance, waiting for the moment when restraint was no longer necessary. The joining crystals, High Priest Yexthal announced, and temple servants approached carrying ornate containers holding the bioresponsive gems that would seal their union. The crystals were ancient artifacts, allegedly created by the first Veltar civilization to demonstrate the permanent nature of diplomatic marriages. When touched simultaneously by both partners, they would record genetic and psychological patterns, creating a permanent bond that supposedly enhanced empathy and understanding between different species. Zaraeth reached for her crystal, then paused as Kane raised his hand. High Priest, Kane said calmly, before we proceed, I should probably mention that human physiology doesn't interact with Veltar bioresponsive technology the way your scientists expect. A murmur of confusion rippled through the assembly. High Priest Yexthal's ceremonial robe shifted from formal blue to uncertain yellow. Admiral, the joining crystals have been used successfully in diplomatic marriages for over 3,000 years. They respond to all known forms of sentient consciousness. Yes, Kane agreed. They do. But human consciousness operates on multiple levels simultaneously, including some that most species don't possess. When I touch that crystal, it's going to record more than you're prepared for. Emperor Thaxion leaned forward on his throne at the hall's head table. Explain. Kane looked up at the dome, where more human ships continued to appear in silent formation. Your Imperial Majesty, humanity's development followed a different path than most galactic civilizations. We evolved on a world that tried to kill us every day for millions of years. We learned to think on multiple levels simultaneously: individual survival, group dynamics, long-term strategic planning, threat assessment, resource management. What you call consciousness, we call the surface layer. Are you saying humans have some form of collective consciousness? High Priest Yexthal asked, his professional curiosity overcoming diplomatic protocol. Not collective. Layered. Every human maintains multiple simultaneous awareness states. It's how we survived long enough to reach the stars. Kane gestured toward the crystal containers. When those artifacts scan my consciousness, they're going to encounter all of those layers, including the ones connected to the Guardian network. The hall fell silent except for the subtle harmonics of the acoustic crystals. Zaraeth felt her skin shift through several emotional spectrums as the implications became clear. Connected how? She asked. 300 years ago, when humanity first made contact with the predecessor ruins, we discovered that their technology responded to human neural patterns in ways it didn't respond to other species. We could access their databases, activate their systems, communicate with their automated guardians. Kane's expression grew thoughtful. We initially assumed this was because human consciousness was more primitive, less specialized than other galactic civilizations. But that wasn't the reason, Emperor Thaxion said, his voice carrying overtones of growing realization.
No. It was because human consciousness was more complex. The predecessors designed their technology to interface with minds that could process multiple awareness levels simultaneously. They were waiting for a species that thought the way they did. High Priest Yexthal set down the crystal containers with hands that trembled slightly. Admiral, are you telling us that when you touch these crystals, you'll be creating a direct link between Princess Zareth and the Guardian Network? That's exactly what I'm telling you.
And, once that link is established, the Guardians will have direct access to Veltar consciousness patterns. They'll be able to evaluate your species from the inside. The assembly erupted in heated discussion, noble voices raised in alarm and outrage. Through it all, Cain remained perfectly calm, waiting for the noise to subside. Zareth studied his face, searching for some sign of deception or manipulation. Instead, she found something that surprised her: genuine concern. Whatever game he was playing, he wasn't enjoying it. "Why are you telling us this now?" she asked.
"Why not before the ceremony?"
"Because until now, you had no choice. The Guardian fleet was already approaching. Your military couldn't stop them.
Your diplomats couldn't negotiate with them.
Your only option was to wait for judgment." Cain picked up one of the crystals, holding it carefully in his palm. "But this changes things. If you're willing to accept the risk, this marriage could give your people a voice in the evaluation process."
"What kind of risk?" Emperor Thaxion demanded.
"The kind where we find out whether Veltar consciousness is compatible with Guardian technology. If it is, your people might have a chance to prove their worth directly.
If it's not..." Cain paused. The feedback could be fatal.
To both of us.
The silence stretched until High Priest Yexthal cleared his throat nervously.
"Your Imperial Majesty, this is far beyond the scope of normal ceremonial proceedings. Perhaps we should postpone."
"No."
Zareth surprised herself with the firmness of her response.
"Admiral Cain, you said this might give my people a voice. What exactly does that mean?"
Cain studied her face with the same intensity he had shown when examining the orbital defenses. "It means instead of being judged by external observation, the Guardians could experience Veltar consciousness directly. They could understand your species from within, see your potential for growth and development rather than just your current actions."
"And the cost?"
"If the integration succeeds, you'll be permanently connected to the Guardian network. You'll experience existence on a scale that most biological minds can't process.
You might survive it, or you might not." Cain's expression softened slightly. "I won't lie to you, Princess. The odds aren't good.
But they're better than waiting for the fleet to arrive and hoping for mercy." Zareth looked around the hall, taking in the faces of her people.
Thousands of years of civilization, art, philosophy, and achievement.
All of it hanging in the balance of a decision she had to make in the next few minutes.
"What about humanity?" she asked. "What happens to your species if this goes wrong?" Cain's smile was barely visible.
"Humanity has been playing a much longer game than anyone realized, Your Highness.
We've been preparing for this evaluation for 3 centuries. We have contingencies."
Such as? Such as the fact that the Guardian fleet isn't the only ancient technology we've awakened."
Before anyone could ask what he meant, the hall's emergency communication system activated.
Fleet Admiral Zektar's voice echoed through the space, carrying harmonics of barely controlled panic. "Your Imperial Majesty, we're detecting massive energy discharges throughout the galaxy. Every major star system is reporting the appearance of previously undetected structures.
Stations, defense platforms, weapons systems.
They're appearing everywhere simultaneously." Cain nodded as if this was exactly what he had expected. "The Guardian evaluation protocol doesn't just involve a single fleet, Your Imperial Majesty.
It's a galaxy-wide assessment.
Every spacefaring civilization is being evaluated simultaneously."
"How many civilizations?"
Zareth asked, though she wasn't sure she wanted to know the answer.
"Current estimate?"
"Approximately 12,000 separate species with interstellar capability." Kane manipulated his wrist device, projecting a holographic display that showed the galaxy in real time. Red markers appeared throughout the spiral arms, each one representing a civilization under evaluation.
All of them have the same choice we're offering you: cooperation and potential survival, or resistance and certain extinction.
Emperor Thaxion rose from his throne, his massive form casting shadows across the ceremonial hall.
Admiral, you're describing the end of galactic civilization as we know it. No, Your Imperial Majesty.
I'm describing its graduation exam. The holographic display zoomed in on several systems where the red markers were flickering between different colors.
Some species are adapting quickly. Others are choosing to fight. A few have already been.
Kane paused, searching for appropriate words.
Archived for future study. Archived? High Priest Yexthal asked. Their planets are intact, their infrastructure preserved, their cultural achievements recorded for posterity. But the species themselves have been removed from active existence. Kane's expression grew solemn. The Guardians aren't malevolent. They're thorough.
They preserve what's valuable while eliminating what's dangerous.
Zaraeth felt the weight of the crystal in her palm, its bioresponsive surface warm against her skin.
Such a small thing to carry such enormous consequences.
If I do this, she said quietly, if we complete the marriage and create this connection, what guarantees do we have? None, Kane replied honestly.
But I can tell you that every species that has successfully integrated with the Guardian network has not only survived but thrived.
They've achieved technological and social advancement beyond anything currently possible. And those that haven't successfully integrated are no longer available for comment.
Through the dome above, she could see the Guardian fleet growing larger as it approached the system. Hundreds of ships that defied conventional understanding of physics, carrying the power to reshape or destroy entire civilizations with equal ease. Your Highness, High Priest Yexthal said carefully, perhaps we should consult with the Council of Elders before. There's no time, Zaraeth interrupted.
Admiral Kane, if we proceed with the ceremony, will you be able to guide the integration process? To some extent.
But, ultimately, the Guardians will evaluate Veltar consciousness based on what they find.
I can't change what you are as a species.
I can only help them see it clearly.
Then, we proceed.
She turned to face the assembled nobility, her voice carrying to every corner of the hall. Citizens of the Empire, we stand at a crossroads that will determine not only our future but our survival. I choose to trust in the strength of our civilization and the wisdom of our ancestors. High Priest Yexthal picked up the second crystal with hands that had steadied into professional competence.
Then, let us complete what we have begun. Zaraeth looked at Kane one final time. Admiral, are you ready? Princess, I've been ready for this moment since the day I was born.
Together, they reached for their crystals. As their fingers made contact with the bioresponsive surfaces, the artifacts began to glow with increasing intensity. The light spread up their arms like living fire, and, suddenly, Zaraeth could feel something vast and ancient turning its attention toward them. The Guardian network was awakening, and, for the first time in 50,000 years, it was about to experience consciousness from the inside. The moment the crystals activated, reality fractured. Zaraeth felt her consciousness expand beyond the boundaries of her physical form, spiraling outward through layers of existence she had never imagined. The ceremonial hall disappeared, replaced by a vast network of interconnected minds that stretched across the galaxy like a living constellation. She was herself, but also something infinitely larger, connected to intelligence that made her entire civilization seem like a single thought in an infinite mind. Welcome, child of the spiral. The voice came from everywhere and nowhere, speaking directly to her consciousness in harmonics that bypassed language entirely. Around her, the Guardian network revealed itself in its full magnificent complexity, not just ships and stations, but a living system of evolved consciousness that had been watching and guiding galactic development for millennia. We have been waiting, the voice continued, and Zaraeth realized she was experiencing communication from beings that had transcended physical existence so long ago that her species' entire history was less than a moment in their perception. Through the connection, she felt Kane's presence like an anchor point in the swirling chaos of expanded awareness.
His consciousness was different from hers, structured in ways that seemed both alien and familiar.
Where her thoughts flowed in smooth currents, his mind operated on multiple levels simultaneously, processing individual survival, tactical assessment, emotional response, and strategic planning as separate but connected streams. The human demonstrates the pattern we sought, another guardian voice observed. Consciousness capable of existing on multiple awareness levels while maintaining individual identity. This is why their species could access our technology, but the Veltar consciousness shows different potential, a third voice added, and Zaraeth felt the Guardian network's attention focus on her with uncomfortable intensity. Deep emotional resonance, intuitive understanding of complex social systems, capacity for empathy that extends beyond species boundaries. Interesting, through the network, Zaraeth began to perceive the galaxy as the Guardians saw it. 12,000 civilizations at various stages of development, each one representing billions of individual minds struggling to understand their place in the universe. Most species had reached technological plateaus not because they lacked intelligence, but because they lacked the consciousness complexity needed for the next level of advancement. Show us, the Guardian voices requested, and, suddenly, Zaraeth was experiencing memories that weren't her own. She watched the rise and fall of the predecessor civilization, beings who had achieved technological mastery over the universe only to realize that individual consciousness was too limited to handle such power responsibly. Their solution had been transcendence, evolving beyond physical existence while leaving behind guardians to guide younger species along safer paths. We learned that consciousness must evolve before technology, the Guardians explained. Power without wisdom leads to universal destruction. We have prevented 17 galactic extinction events by maintaining technological limitations on developing species, but limitation has become stagnation, another voice added with what felt like sadness. Most species reach their plateau and remain there for thousands of years, never developing the consciousness complexity needed for true advancement. Through the network, Zaraeth saw glimpses of these stagnant civilizations, species with faster-than-light travel but no concept of cooperation, others with vast military forces but no understanding of sustainable development. The galaxy was filled with adolescent civilizations playing with forces they couldn't control. Until humanity appeared, the first guardian voice continued. A species that developed consciousness complexity before technological advancement. They reached the stars with primitive ships but sophisticated awareness patterns. They could interface with our technology because their minds already operated on the levels we required. Zaraeth felt Kane's consciousness respond to this observation. Through their connection, she experienced his memories of humanity's first contact with predecessor ruins. Small teams of researchers working for decades to understand technology that seemed designed for minds more complex than their own. The gradual realization that humans weren't too primitive to understand Guardian technology, they were the first species advanced enough to use it properly. But humanity alone is insufficient, the Guardians continued. A single species with advanced consciousness cannot guide galactic development. We require diversity of thought, multiple approaches to consciousness evolution, a network of species capable of cooperative advancement, which brings us to the current evaluation, another voice explained, and Zaraeth felt the full scope of what was happening across the galaxy. 12,000 species being tested simultaneously. Most will fail. Some will be preserved for future study. A few may demonstrate the potential for consciousness evolution, through the Guardian network. She could perceive the evaluations happening in real time. The hegemony's military fleets were attempting to engage Guardian vessels and, discovering that their weapons had no effect on ships that existed partially outside normal spacetime. The Christek Republic was trying to negotiate from a position of strength and, learning that their concept of power was meaningless to beings who could restructure matter at the quantum level. The Veltar Empire shows promise, the Guardians observed, and Zaraeth felt their attention focus on her memories. Complex social structures, sophisticated diplomatic traditions, capacity for long-term thinking and cooperative behavior. But also aggressive territorial expansion, exploitation of less developed species, and a history of solving disputes through warfare. She experienced the Guardian's analysis of her civilization as if watching her own life from outside. Every war her people had fought, every conquest they had achieved, every species they had dominated or destroyed in their expansion across the stars. The pattern was clear: the Veltar had achieved galactic prominence through superior military force and technological advancement, but they had never evolved beyond the fundamental paradigm of competition for limited resources. However, a guardian voice added, and Zaraeth felt something that might have been hope. The princess demonstrates individual consciousness patterns that suggest evolutionary potential. Deep empathy, intuitive understanding of consequences, willingness to sacrifice personal advantage for species survival. These traits indicate possible paths forward. Kane's presence in the network shifted, and she felt him directing the Guardian's attention toward specific aspects of Veltar culture. Not their military achievements or technological developments, but their art, philosophy, and capacity for emotional connection. The way Veltar society valued long-term stability over short-term gain. Their sophisticated diplomatic traditions that had prevented countless wars through negotiation rather than force. The human advocates for their chosen species, the Guardians observed with what felt like amusement. This itself demonstrates consciousness evolution. Individual identity maintained while accepting responsibility for cooperative development. Through the network, Zaraeth began to understand humanity's true role in the galactic evaluation. They hadn't just awakened the Guardian network, they had positioned themselves as interpreters, helping the ancient beings understand the potential of younger species. Every human marriage treaty, every diplomatic agreement, every cultural exchange had been part of a 300-year campaign to demonstrate that galactic civilization could evolve beyond competitive destruction. But the evaluation requires more than advocacy, the Guardian voices explained. It requires demonstration. Princess Zaraeth of the Veltar Empire, will you accept consciousness expansion to serve as an interface between your species and the Guardian network? The question came with full awareness of what it meant. Consciousness expansion would grant her access to Guardian technology and knowledge, but it would also permanently alter her neural patterns. She would retain her individual identity, but she would also become something more than traditionally Veltar. A bridge between evolutionary levels. The choice affects not just yourself, the Guardians continued, but the future development of your entire species. Accept, and the Veltar Empire will be guided toward consciousness evolution. Refuse, and your civilization will be preserved but limited to its current developmental level. Through her connection to Kane, she felt his reassurance. He had made this same choice centuries ago, accepting consciousness expansion to serve as humanity's representative to the Guardian network. The process was challenging but not destructive. It enhanced rather than replaced existing consciousness patterns. What about the other species? She asked. The other 11,998 civilizations under evaluation, most will be found unsuitable for advancement. Their consciousness patterns are too rigid, their social structures too competitive, their technological development too focused on control rather than cooperation. They will be preserved at their current level and studied for future reference. Images flowed through the network showing the fate of species that failed evaluation. Their planets were carefully maintained, their populations kept healthy and stable, but their technological development was limited to prevent them from becoming threats to galactic stability. They would exist as living museums of evolutionary paths that had reached dead ends. But some few may demonstrate potential. The Guardians continued. Perhaps 50 species from this evaluation cycle will be offered the choice you now face. Consciousness expansion and cooperative development, or comfortable limitation. Zaraeth felt the weight of decision settling over her consciousness like a physical force. Not just her own future, but the evolutionary path of her entire species. Through the Guardian network, she could perceive the vast timeline of galactic development stretching ahead, millions of years of careful guidance toward true civilization, or stagnation disguised as preservation. I accept, she said, and felt reality shift around her response. The consciousness expansion began immediately. Guardian technology interfaced directly with her neural patterns, not replacing her thoughts but expanding their scope and complexity. She remained Princess Zaraeth of the Veltar Empire, but she also became something more, a node in a network of evolved consciousness that spanned the galaxy. Through her enhanced awareness, she could perceive the other species that had accepted evolution. Crystalline beings from the outer rim whose consciousness operated through harmonic resonance. Collective intelligences from gas giant environments that thought in terms of atmospheric currents. Individual minds so diverse that communication required guardian mediation, but all sharing the common goal of cooperative advancement. Welcome to the next stage. Kane's consciousness touched hers through the network, and she understood that their marriage had become something far more significant than diplomatic alliance. They were pioneer interfaces, representatives of species learning to cooperate on levels that transcended traditional biological limitations. The evaluation continues, the guardian voices explained. 47 other species have accepted consciousness expansion. 3,000 more are under extended observation. The remainder will be archived within the next 72 hours. Through the network, Zaraeth watched the transformation beginning across the galaxy. Guardian vessels appeared at every world that had accepted evolution, their advanced technology beginning the careful process of consciousness expansion for entire civilizations. It would take generations to complete, but the foundation was being laid for a truly cooperative galactic community. Your species will be among the first to achieve full integration, the Guardians told her. The Veltar demonstrate high potential for emotional and social evolution. Combined with human consciousness patterns, your alliance may become the template for future development, but even as she experienced the magnificent scope of Guardian planning, Zaraeth remained aware of the billions of beings whose civilizations would be frozen at their current level. Species that might have evolved given more time, individuals with the potential for growth who would never have the opportunity to realize it. Compassion for those who cannot advance is natural, the Guardians observed, responding to her emotional reaction. But premature advancement has led to 17 galactic extinction events. The universe itself requires protection from consciousness that gains power without wisdom. However, another guardian voice added, evolved species maintain responsibility for guiding younger ones. In time, when current integrations are complete, additional evaluations may be possible. Evolution is a process, not a single event. The network began to withdraw its direct connection, leaving Zaraeth with enhanced consciousness but restored individual autonomy. As her awareness contracted back to manageable levels, she found herself once again in the ceremonial hall, standing beside Kane as the joining crystals pulsed with residual energy. But everything had changed. Through her expanded consciousness, she could perceive the Guardian vessels in orbit not as threats but as teachers. The human fleet maintaining positions around Veltar defenses were no longer observers but partners in the most important transformation in galactic history. The marriage is complete, High Priest Yexthal announced, his voice seeming to come from very far away. May the union bring prosperity to both species and wisdom to the galaxy. As the assembled nobility erupted in traditional celebration, Zaraeth looked at her husband with awareness that transcended normal perception. Kane was human, but also something more, a representative of evolved consciousness that had been preparing for this moment since his species first reached the stars. Now comes the real challenge. Kane's consciousness touched hers through their enhanced connection. Helping our peoples understand what they're about to become through the ceremonial hall's dome, she could see the Guardian fleet taking positions throughout the star system. Not as conquerors or judges, but as guides preparing to shepherd the Veltar Empire through the most significant transformation in their species' history. The evaluation was complete. The real work was about to begin. 3 months after the marriage ceremony that changed the galaxy, Zaraeth stood in what had once been the Imperial War Room, watching holographic displays that showed the transformation occurring across Veltar space. The room itself had been redesigned using Guardian technology, its walls now displaying real-time consciousness integration patterns for every major population center on the planet. The younger generations are adapting more quickly than we projected, Kane observed, his enhanced awareness allowing him to process multiple data streams simultaneously. Children who haven't reached full neural development are integrating Guardian interfaces almost instinctively. Zaraeth nodded, her own expanded consciousness tracking the progress of millions of individuals as they underwent gradual consciousness enhancement. The process was nothing like the dramatic transformation she had experienced during the marriage ceremony. Instead, it resembled a careful cultivation, with Guardian technology slowly expanding neural pathways and enhancing cognitive capacity over periods of months or years. But the military leadership is struggling, she replied, her emotional resonance picking up currents of fear and resistance from the orbital defense stations. Admiral Zektar filed another formal protest yesterday, claiming the integration process is compromising operational readiness.
Kane's expression showed understanding rather than frustration. He's not wrong. Consciousness expansion temporarily reduces efficiency in traditional military operations.
Enhanced awareness makes it difficult to maintain the simple us versus them mentality that conventional warfare requires. Through the room's displays, Zaraeth could observe this phenomenon directly. Veltar military personnel who had undergone even basic consciousness enhancement showed dramatically reduced aggression levels and increased capacity for long-term strategic thinking. They could still function as defenders and peacekeepers, but their ability to engage in offensive operations was significantly compromised. The Guardians designed it that way, she realized. Species that complete consciousness evolution become incapable of aggressive warfare.
Among other things,
Kane manipulated the displays to show integration patterns across the galaxy.
46 other species are undergoing similar transformations.
Each one is losing the capacity for territorial expansion, resource competition, and dominance-based social structures.
The implications were staggering.
Galactic civilization as it had existed for thousands of years was ending, replaced by something unprecedented, a network of evolved species incapable of destructive conflict but enhanced for cooperative development.
What about the species that refused evolution? Zaraeth asked, though she suspected she already knew the answer.
Kane's consciousness touched hers through their enhanced bond, sharing images and data that conventional communication couldn't convey. Across the galaxy, Guardian preservation protocols were nearing completion. Thousands of civilizations had been carefully archived, their populations maintained in comfortable but limited environments, their technological development capped at pre-integration levels. The hegemony fought until the end, Kane explained. They deployed every weapon system they possessed, attempted to breach Guardian defenses with coordinated fleet actions involving 3 million ships. The Guardians disabled their entire military infrastructure in approximately 17 minutes without causing a single casualty.
And, now their ships can't achieve faster than light travel. Their weapons systems have been deactivated.
Their planetary governments continue to function, their populations remain healthy and well-fed, but they're contained within their current territory until they evolve sufficient consciousness complexity to join the galactic community safely. Zaraeth studied the displays showing hegemony space, where once mighty fleets now served as orbital habitats for populations learning to exist without the expansion and conquest that had defined their civilization for millennia. The Guardians maintained their worlds at optimal conditions, but the species would remain frozen at their current development level until they demonstrated fundamental changes in consciousness patterns.
How long will that take? She asked. For most species? Thousands of years. Maybe tens of thousands. Kane's expression grew thoughtful. But that's not our immediate concern.
Emperor Thaxion requested this meeting for a specific reason.
As if summoned by his words, the room's entrance announced the arrival of the Imperial delegation.
Emperor Thaxion entered accompanied by High Counselor Vexon and a collection of civilian and military leaders whose emotional displays showed complex mixtures of curiosity, anxiety, and anticipation.
Daughter, the Emperor greeted her, his bioluminescence showing the deep blue of formal occasions tinged with silver uncertainty. Admiral Kane.
We require guidance on matters of immediate importance. The integration process is proceeding within acceptable parameters, Zaraeth replied, her enhanced consciousness automatically accessing current statistical summaries. Neural enhancement completion rates are ahead of projections, and social adaptation indices indicate successful cultural evolution.
That's not what concerns us.
High Counselor Vexon stepped forward, his diplomatic training evident in his carefully controlled emotional displays.
We're receiving communication requests from preserved species throughout the galaxy.
They want to understand what's happening to civilizations that accepted Guardian enhancement. Kane nodded as if he had been expecting this development.
Standard pattern.
Preserved species always experience curiosity about evolutionary alternatives during the initial integration period. The Guardians encourage communication as part of their long-term development strategy.
But we don't know how to respond, Emperor Thaxion said, his massive form settling into one of the room's enhanced furniture systems. What do we tell species that chose preservation? That they made the wrong decision?
Zaraeth felt the weight of this question through her enhanced consciousness. The communication requests weren't just diplomatic courtesy, they represented the fears and doubts of billions of beings who had chosen security over transformation and were now questioning that decision as they watched evolved species beginning to achieve technological and social capabilities beyond their imagination. "We tell them the truth," she said finally. "That both paths have value, but they lead to fundamentally different destinations." Through the room's displays, she called up communication logs from preserved species.
The Christek Republic was requesting detailed information about consciousness enhancement side effects.
The Territorial Alliance wanted to understand the long-term implications of Guardian oversight.
Dozens of smaller civilizations were asking whether preservation decisions could be reversed.
Can they be reversed? Emperor Thaxion asked, his question cutting to the heart of the matter.
Kane's expression grew serious. Yes, but not in the way they're hoping.
A preserved species can request re-evaluation, but they would need to demonstrate fundamental consciousness evolution through their own efforts. No Guardian assistance, no technological shortcuts. They would have to prove they had developed sufficient wisdom to handle enhanced capabilities responsibly.
How many preserved species have successfully done that? High Counselor Vexhan asked. In the past 50,000 years? 3.
The silence that followed was broken only by the subtle harmonics of the room's Guardian-enhanced systems. 3 successful consciousness evolutions among thousands of preserved species represented odds that most civilizations would find discouraging. But, Kane continued, the current integration cycle is different. For the first time, preserved species can observe the evolution process directly through communication with enhanced civilizations. They can see what consciousness expansion actually produces instead of just imagining it.
Zaraeth understood the implications immediately. We're not just undergoing evolution ourselves.
We're providing examples for species that might be capable of self-directed development.
Exactly.
The Guardians are hoping that successful integration by 47 species will inspire consciousness evolution among preserved civilizations.
It's an experiment in guided development versus demonstrated possibility.
Through her enhanced awareness, Zaraeth began to perceive the true scope of Guardian planning. The current evaluation cycle wasn't just about identifying species ready for advancement, it was about creating a network of evolved civilizations that could serve as inspiration and guidance for the thousands of species that weren't yet ready for enhancement.
So what do we tell them? Emperor Thaxion asked again.
Zaraeth studied the communication requests, her expanded consciousness analyzing the emotional and psychological patterns embedded in each message. Fear, curiosity, regret, hope, all the complex reactions of beings who had chosen safety and were now watching others achieve capabilities they had never imagined. We tell them that evolution is always possible, she said, but it requires choosing growth over security, cooperation over competition, wisdom over power. We share what we're learning about consciousness development, but we let them know that the path we took through Guardian enhancement is only one way forward.
And if they ask about requesting re-evaluation? High Counselor Vexhan asked. Kane answered this one. We explained the requirements honestly.
Fundamental changes in consciousness patterns, demonstrated through centuries of peaceful development and cooperative behavior. No shortcuts, no external assistance, and no guarantee of success.
That seems harsh, Emperor Thaxion observed.
It's realistic, Zaraeth replied, her enhanced empathy allowing her to feel the emotional weight of what they were discussing.
Consciousness evolution can't be forced or faked. It has to be genuine transformation, which means it has to come from within.
The room's displays shifted to show real-time updates from across Veltar space. Integration was proceeding smoothly in most regions, with enhanced individuals beginning to demonstrate capabilities that seemed almost miraculous by traditional standards. Enhanced pattern recognition was leading to breakthrough solutions in resource management.
Expanded empathy was eliminating most forms of interpersonal conflict.
Increased cognitive capacity was accelerating scientific and artistic development at exponential rates. But the most significant changes were social. Traditional hierarchies based on dominance and competition were dissolving, replaced by cooperative structures that prioritized collective benefit over individual advancement. The Veltar Empire was transforming into something that no longer resembled an empire at all.
We're going to need new governmental structures, Emperor Thaxion said, his bioluminescence showing the deep contemplation of someone processing fundamental change. Traditional imperial authority becomes meaningless when every citizen has enhanced consciousness and cooperative instincts. The Guardians have models we can adapt, Kane offered. Governance through consensus building rather than authority imposition. Decision-making based on optimal outcomes for all stakeholders rather than advantage for ruling classes. Democratic revolution through consciousness evolution, High Counselor Vexon murmured. The end of monarchy through enhanced empathy. Zaraeth felt her father's emotional state through her expanded awareness, not resistance to change, but genuine curiosity about alternatives. The consciousness enhancement process was affecting him too, gradually shifting his perspective from ruler-subject relationships toward collaborative partnership models. There's something else we need to discuss, Kane said, his expression indicating serious business. The Guardian Network has made a decision about timeline acceleration. The room's displays shifted to show galactic integration patterns. Instead of the gradual centuries-long process that had been originally planned, enhancement was proceeding much more rapidly than projected. Enhanced species are adapting to consciousness expansion faster than the Guardians anticipated, Kane explained. Integration that was supposed to take generations is completing in months. Some individuals are achieving neural enhancement levels that shouldn't have been possible for decades. Including us? Zaraeth asked, though she already knew the answer. Her own consciousness had expanded far beyond what she had experienced during the marriage ceremony. Especially us. The human-Veltar integration is serving as an acceleration catalyst for both species. Our neural patterns are enhancing each other in ways the Guardians didn't predict. Through their enhanced bond, Zaraeth could feel the truth of this statement. Her consciousness had grown not just through Guardian technology, but through constant interaction with Kane's uniquely human awareness patterns. Meanwhile, his enhanced empathy and emotional resonance had developed far beyond typical human ranges through integration with her Veltar neural structures. What does this mean for the timeline? Emperor Thaxion asked. It means we're going to achieve full integration in approximately 2 years instead of 2 centuries, Kane replied. And, when we do, we'll be ready for the next phase of Guardian development. Which is? Kane's expression grew thoughtful as he accessed information from the Guardian Network. Exploration beyond the galactic boundaries. The predecessors didn't just transcend physical existence, they discovered that consciousness evolution opens pathways to entirely different forms of reality. Once we complete integration, we'll be invited to begin exploring those possibilities. The implications were staggering. Galactic civilization wasn't the end goal of consciousness evolution, it was just the beginning. Enhanced species would eventually gain access to realms of existence that transcended normal spacetime, joining the predecessors in exploring realities that no unenhanced mind could even imagine. But, first, Zaraeth said, bringing the discussion back to immediate concerns, we need to help preserved species understand what's possible. Maybe some of them will be inspired to begin their own consciousness evolution. And, if they're not? High Counselor Vexon asked. Then, they remain preserved until they're ready, Kane replied simply. The Guardians have been patient for 50,000 years. They can wait longer if necessary. Through the room's displays, Zaraeth watched the ongoing transformation of galactic civilization. Evolved species learning to cooperate on levels that had never before been possible. Preserved civilizations struggling to understand what they had chosen to reject. And, somewhere beyond the galaxy's edge, ancient consciousness waiting to welcome newcomers to realms of existence that redefined the meaning of life itself. The evaluation was complete. The integration was accelerating. And, the next phase of cosmic evolution was about to begin. 5 years after the marriage that changed the galaxy, Zaraeth stood on the observation deck of the first transgalactic exploration vessel ever constructed by evolved consciousness. The ship itself was a marvel that transcended conventional physics, part matter, part energy, part thought made manifest through Guardian technology that had finally been shared with species ready to use it responsibly. Through the vessel's consciousness-responsive viewing systems, she could observe the galaxy they were preparing to leave behind. What had once been a chaotic collection of competing civilizations was now a network of cooperative communities, their combined efforts achieving wonders that no single species could have imagined.
The integration is complete across all participating species, Kane reported, his consciousness interfacing directly with the ship's navigation systems.
47 civilizations have achieved full neural enhancement and technological transcendence.
3,712 preserved species remain under Guardian stewardship, with 53 showing signs of spontaneous consciousness evolution. Better than we hoped, Zaraeth replied, her enhanced empathy detecting currents of satisfaction and anticipation throughout the ship's crew. Representatives from every evolved species had joined this first expedition beyond the galactic boundaries, their combined consciousness patterns creating a collective intelligence unlike anything in known history. The ship's communication systems activated, carrying a message from the Veltar homeworld that was now the center of an interspecies cooperative rather than an imperial capital. Emperor Thaxion's voice carried harmonics of pride and farewell. Daughter, as you begin this journey into the unknown, know that you carry the hopes and dreams of all our peoples. The transformation you helped initiate has given us capabilities beyond our wildest imaginations, but, more importantly, it has given us the wisdom to use those capabilities for the benefit of all consciousness.
Through the communication link, Zaraeth could perceive the changes that had transformed her homeworld. Cities that grew like living organisms, adapting to their inhabitants' needs while maintaining perfect ecological balance.
Transportation systems that responded to thought rather than mechanical control. Social structures based on cooperative decision-making that eliminated poverty, inequality, and conflict while maximizing individual potential and collective achievement.
The preserved species are beginning to request more detailed information about consciousness evolution paths, High Counselor Vexon added to the transmission.
The Christek Republic has established meditation centers focused on developing enhanced empathy. The Territorial Alliance is experimenting with cooperative governance models.
Small changes, but they represent genuine attempts at self-directed consciousness development. Kane nodded as he processed this information.
The demonstration effect is working. Seeing what evolved consciousness can achieve is inspiring preserved species to attempt their own development.
How long before they're ready for re-evaluation? Zaraeth asked. Conservative estimate?
500 to 1,000 years for the most advanced preserved civilizations.
But, that's actually encouraging, it's much faster than historical patterns suggest.
Through the ship's enhanced viewing systems, Zaraeth could observe Guardian vessels positioned throughout the galaxy, their role having evolved from enforcers to teachers and protectors. They maintained the technological limitations that kept preserved species safe while providing subtle guidance for those attempting consciousness evolution. We're receiving final authorization from the Guardian Network, announced Yextal, the ship's navigation coordinator whose consciousness had been enhanced to interface directly with transcendence-level technology.
Transgalactic exploration protocols are active. Predecessor realm access is confirmed.
The moment they had been preparing for during 5 years of integration was finally arriving. The ship would leave normal spacetime entirely, traveling through realms of existence that only transcended consciousness could perceive. They would join the predecessors in exploring realities where thought became substance, where consciousness shaped the fundamental laws of physics, where the distinction between individual and collective awareness became meaningless.
All crew members should prepare for transcendence transition, Kane announced through the ship's communication systems. Remember your training.
Maintain individual identity while accepting collective consciousness integration.
Trust the process.
Zaraeth felt the familiar sensation of consciousness expansion beginning, but this was different from anything she had experienced before. Instead of simply enhancing her existing awareness, the process was preparing to fundamentally transform her relationship with reality itself. She would remain herself, but she would also become part of something infinitely larger. Through their enhanced bond, she felt Kane's consciousness reaching for hers, providing anchor points of familiar awareness in the storm of transformation. His human neural patterns had evolved far beyond anything recognizable as traditionally human, but the core of his identity remained constant: the methodical assessment, the strategic thinking, the protective instincts that had made him an ideal representative of his species.
Ready? He asked through their consciousness link.
Ready, she replied, and together they activated the transcendence protocols.
Reality dissolved around them as the ship transitioned into realms where consciousness was the primary organizing principle.
Through transcended awareness, Zaraeth could perceive the predecessors not as distant figures but as immediate presences sharing the same experiential space. Ancient beings who had evolved beyond physical existence welcomed the newcomers with emotions that bypassed language entirely. Welcome to the next stage of existence, asterisk the predecessor consciousness communicated through direct experience rather than words. You have completed the first level of evolution successfully. A first level, asterisk Zarath asked, her individual consciousness maintaining coherence within the vast collective awareness. Planetary consciousness evolution leads to galactic cooperation, which enables transgalactic exploration, which opens pathways to universal awareness, which prepares consciousness for multi-dimensional existence. Asterisk the predecessor response came with images and experiences that showed the true scope of evolutionary possibility. You have taken the first step on an infinite journey through transcended perception. Zarath began to understand the magnitude of what lay ahead. The galaxy they had left behind was just one of countless reality structures where consciousness could develop. Beyond galactic boundaries lay regions where different forms of awareness had evolved under alternative physical laws. And, beyond those lay realms where consciousness itself had become the substrate of reality. Each level of evolution prepares consciousness for greater complexity and deeper understanding. Asterisk another predecessor explained. But each level also increases responsibility for guiding younger forms of awareness. Kane's consciousness touched hers with understanding. We're not just exploring these realms. We're being prepared to become guides ourselves. Correct. In time, when you have achieved sufficient transcendence, you will return to guide the next wave of consciousness evolution. The preserved species in your galaxy will eventually be ready for enhancement, and evolved species will be needed to provide guidance and support. Asterisk through transcended awareness, Zarath could perceive this pattern extending back through cosmic time. Layer upon layer of consciousness evolution, with transcended beings serving as guides for younger awareness at every level. The Guardians themselves were just one tier in an infinite hierarchy of evolved consciousness that stretched across multiple universes. But growth requires experience. Asterisk the predecessors continued. Asterisk before you can guide others, you must explore the full scope of transcended existence. You must understand what consciousness can become when freed from the limitations of physical reality. Asterisk the ship began moving through realms that defied conventional description. Regions where thought became landscape, where emotions manifested as living ecosystems, where mathematical concepts existed as inhabited worlds. The crew experienced these environments not as observers but as participants, their consciousness adapting to forms of existence that no physical mind could have imagined. This is what the Guardians were protecting, Zarath realized as they encountered a realm where music had evolved into sentient beings that communicated through harmonic patterns of impossible complexity. Not just galactic civilization, but access to infinite forms of consciousness. And now we understand why they were so careful about who gained access, Kane replied, his awareness expanding to encompass conceptual frameworks that reorganized his understanding of existence itself. Through months of exploration, they encountered transcended consciousness from thousands of different evolutionary paths. Beings that had evolved from crystalline matrices, from plasma fields, from quantum fluctuations in spacetime itself. Each form of consciousness brought unique perspectives and capabilities to the collective awareness that spanned multiple universes. But, perhaps most significantly, they began to understand their own role in the cosmic pattern. As consciousness evolved through multiple levels of transcendence, the responsibility for guiding younger awareness became increasingly important. Every transcended being served as a teacher and protector for consciousness that had not yet achieved its level of development. We're going to return to the galaxy eventually, Zarath said as they explored a realm where probability distributions had achieved sentience and were teaching them about alternative approaches to decision-making. Not as conquerors or rulers, but as guides. The preserved species will be ready for re-evaluation in a few centuries, Kane agreed. When they are, we'll be there to help them understand what consciousness evolution actually means. And, eventually, you will transcend beyond the need for guidance roles, asterisk the predecessors explained. Asterisk but, that transition requires eons of experience. For now, your path leads toward becoming the next generation of guardians, asterisk through transcended awareness, Zarath could perceive the beautiful complexity of this system. Consciousness evolving through infinite levels of transcendence, with each level accepting responsibility for nurturing the development of younger awareness. No being truly alone, no species abandoned to struggle without support, no form of consciousness left to face the challenges of evolution without guidance from those who had walked the path before.
The marriage treaty, she realized. It wasn't about ending a war between our species. It was about beginning our preparation for this role.
Everything was preparation, Kane replied. The 300-year conflict, the Guardian evaluation, the integration process, even this exploration mission. All of it designed to prepare consciousness for responsibilities we couldn't have imagined. As their exploration continued through realms of increasing transcendence, Zaraeth felt the profound satisfaction of understanding her place in the cosmic pattern. She was no longer just Princess Zaraeth of the Veltar Empire or even an enhanced individual consciousness. She was part of an infinite network of evolved awareness that spanned multiple universes and stretched across cosmic time. But she was also still herself, the individual who had chosen to trust in an unknown future, who had accepted consciousness enhancement to save her people, who had discovered that evolution required not the abandonment of individual identity but its integration into something infinitely larger. Through their enhanced bond, she felt Kane's consciousness resonating with the same realization. He remained the human admiral who had carried the weight of galactic transformation, but he had also become something that transcended species boundaries while maintaining the essential characteristics that had made him uniquely human. The journey continues. The predecessors communicated as the exploration ship prepared to enter realms where consciousness existed as pure possibility rather than manifested experience. Each level of transcendence reveals new horizons of growth and understanding. Each achievement opens pathways to greater complexity and deeper connection. But remember, another predecessor added with harmonics that conveyed eons of accumulated wisdom. The purpose of transcendence is not escape from responsibility but acceptance of greater responsibility. The highest forms of consciousness exist to serve the development of all consciousness. As they entered realms beyond description, Zaraeth carried with her the memory of the galaxy they had left behind. 47 species learning to cooperate on levels never before achieved. Thousands of preserved civilizations being protected and gently guided toward their own consciousness evolution. And somewhere in the vast cosmos, new forms of awareness taking their first tentative steps toward transcendence. The evaluation was complete. The integration had succeeded. The exploration was beginning. And the infinite journey of consciousness evolution continued across multiple universes, carried forward by beings who had learned that the greatest power came not from dominance but from service, not from conquest but from cooperation, not from fear but from love that transcended all boundaries of species, form, and existence itself. The marriage that had begun as a desperate attempt to prevent galactic war had become the foundation for cosmic transcendence. And, in realms beyond imagination, consciousness continued its eternal journey toward forms of existence that even transcended minds could only begin to comprehend.